Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, who will we be missing come kickoff time in Shreveport on Saturday, and who are the next in line to fill their shoes? And also a recap of a Hump Day portal party next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We're going to start this thing off right. Raider! Everything runs through Lubbock.
Great to see you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's $150 back if your team wins. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon today to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Yeah, that is me. Chris, great to see you again. There was so much action since we have last convened that I had to just remind myself who I was, because we'll be touching on a couple of new names on today's program. It turned into a Hump Day portal party as the Red Raiders were both adding some hands, adding some hogs in the interior, on the outside. Some good stuff to get into as we wrap up our conversation coming up in just a bit. But first, wanted to begin, of course, to turn our attention to Shreveport, Louisiana, as we look ahead to the Independence Bowl just a couple of days away. Red Raiders and the Cal Golden Bears. And some of what we'll get into to kick off our conversation, Chris, is basically a refresher as far as the roster that'll be out there, some of what it's missing, and some of those guys that are going to be stepping in to fill those shoes. Now, this is not an official authorized ranking. Nobody catch any feelings out there in the audience if you're a mama, papa, grandpa, grandma, aunt, uncle, sister, brother, whatever. But these are some that definitely are going to be missed. I don't think there's any question about it. And for a variety of reasons. There could be an opt-out. There could be transfer portal stuff. There could be injury reasons. All kinds of things to consider. So why don't we just start with, I guess, that final category I mentioned there, Chris, because he's the guy that we've been missing for a period of time, I suppose. Have had a little bit of time maybe to work some guys in and fill these large shoes. But as you mentioned on yesterday's show, a guy to me like Jalen Hutchings might be the one at the top of the list again that's going to be missing in action. So we can take it from there and then run with it. But in the interior of that defensive line, a big presence not going to be there for the Red Raiders.
Cowan, I think as you look at this game in total, and like you look at what your roster is or what it's been all season and what it'll be Saturday night, I think defensive line is maybe where you're missing the most as far as what guys did for you. Because Jalen Hunt, it's just because there's some tiers to this, like defensive line. I think your left tackle situation, your receiver position, but I think defensive line, it's not just Jalen Hutchings, but it's Miles Cole. It's potentially Dylan Spencer. It's potentially Steve Linton. These are guys that, like, if we would have reeled off this injury list before the season or during the season, you would have been like, oh, this is not going to be good in whatever game you had coming up. It's almost like this is fairly normal for bowl game time, though, because of all the situations you just mentioned. But, yeah, Jalen and Miles are those are, because again, these are big people. You only have so many of them, and you don't have just a lot of experience, depth and all those things. And then we're talking about a few pieces that are even behind the pieces we're talking about, like your Spencer, who would be behind Cole, Linton, who would be in that rotation as well. Then obviously with Hutchings, so you're talking about, my guess would be Tony Bradford and Quincy Ledet start in this game. Those guys have played a ton. Tony Bradford leads your team in sacks and all those things. Both of these guys have played a ton of football. Obviously Quincy will be one of your premier defensive tackles next season. After that, though, is where it gets a bit trickier. Now, Duda Banks fills in some there. You've got Trayvon McAlpine, and you've got, Amir Washington. You've got, Charles Esters and Joseph Adedire on the outside, and I'm kind of blending like your interior with your edge guys. But you're missing some key pieces there, and that's that's a bit tricky when you're going against a running back like, Jaden Ott for Cal. That's a bit concerning. But that's really, to me, as you look at it on paper, what would give you some pause. Now, the flip side is you get Jacob Rodriguez back. You get Josiah Pierre back. Or you have Josiah Pierre in there. You've got Ben Roberts. You're completely good to go. Bryce Ramirez. You're good to go with all your linebackers, all your pieces, all those kinds of things. It's just kind of some of those, key pieces up front, whether it be interior edge guys that may be missing. Because like Dylan Spencer is a maybe. Steve Linton, I'm guessing, is a maybe just because we haven't seen him in a month. And so I'm not even sure if Steve Linton is for sure coming back here next year. That's kind of where that one's at. It's injury related with I think Dylan Spencer and Steve Linton, but still, Miles Cole and no Jalen Hutchings are a no-go, and that is not ideal.
Yeah, the tiers that you're talking about, literally and figuratively, I guess, take it how you want it. To me, I kind of define it as, what were you really relying on as the season concluded to spin your wheel? And while there are wide receivers missing that weren't missing at that time, it wasn't like your passing attack was getting you in games or getting you over the hump to win a game, but your defensive front or your rush D or things like that were things, obviously, that were helping to have you in games and with a chance to win games. So that's kind of how I differentiate, I guess, because you look at some numbers that may not be all that dramatically different, like you're missing 3 guys here, you're missing 3 guys here or whatever, but there is a difference there. The Dylan Spencer thing is really interesting. I don't know how long this has been building. Coach McGuire talked about this yesterday a little bit, a shoulder injury. He also alluded to the thought that it wasn't like going to necessitate surgery. So I guess that's good news. And if he's still possibly going to be there for Saturday, obviously it can't be something that dramatically serious, but has he been playing banged up? I know that, as we got to know this guy earlier on in the season, you're like, wow, another one of those young guns that was being counted upon maybe a little bit earlier than we thought. He was way out of the red shirt conversation early in the season. He was somebody you couldn't really do without. But I'm curious what your take is on kind of the way that he concluded the season, how long this has been going on, and maybe what to anticipate, even though it is listed as just, I guess, questionable.
Yeah, I think it's a fairly newer injury. It doesn't require surgery. This isn't long-term at all, but it just may keep him out Saturday. But the fact that he's a possible participant on, because he is in Shreveport, all those things. It's a possibility, but it's just not ideal timing. Kind of like Jordan Brown, who was going to be elevated at receiver, dealing with a hamstring injury. That's he was set to start and all those things, and so you just kind of been nickel and dimed here enough to where, boy, it's going to be kind of fascinating to see what you end up trotting out there with. And it's like your starters may not be too different compared to what you're used to as far as the guys that you're normally used to seeing play, because so many guys rotate it, like whether it's defensive line or receiver or whatever. We're just talking about those 2 positions now. Yeah. That you see so many guys play, like what quarter are we in, what package are we in, what personnel group are we in, what series are we in, so it changes so much. But it's when you get into the depth and you get into, okay, when we really get into the game, now it's like, ooh, I hadn't seen these guys much, and that's what's interesting. It also, in some ways, can make it exciting too. I don't know how you want to look at that. Tim DeRuyter, Zach Kitley may not view it that way. Or Joey McGuire, but those of us that have watched this team are like, man, this is an exhibition. It's a bowl game. You want to win it. Absolutely. They keep score. They televise it. It gives you some momentum. You want to hold up a trophy after it's all said and done. But at the end of the day, it's kind of fascinating to see some of the younger group or some of the inexperienced group, because this is a springboard to spring football in so many ways.
Yeah, it's kind of like exciting for everybody else in the room when you stick your finger in an electrical outlet, but not so much for you. I'm curious about the other side of the line.
Like Daniel Stern in Home Alone.
Exactly. Like we had a lot of fun watching that. I don't know if he was all that into it or not. In a time before CGI, kids, check it out. Right. Let's flip to the other side of the line of scrimmage. Because first, today's episode brought to you by PrizePicks. Testing your skills on PrizePicks this football season is the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports, and the best way to spice up any game anytime. And congrats to all those with the skills to win up to 25 times their money through the football year. And now you can do the same during the hoops calendar as well. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projected stats, place your entry, and boom, you're ready to roll. And with the NFL playoffs and bowl season coming up, you can also pick combo projections across football and basketball. With easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and a giant selection of players, projections, and stat categories, it's no surprise that PrizePicks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app. So get in on the fun and go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use our code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, that's prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for a first deposit match up to $100 at prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege. Daily fantasy sports made easy. Let's flip to the other side of the line of scrimmage, because along the offensive line, the numbers haven't been large as far as what you're going to be missing, but it's significant anytime you're talking about a premier position like left tackle. And I'm going back to last season around this time, and we're talking about you're kind of tinkering leading up to the bowl game with trying guys here or there. And just like you said, a springboard into the spring or into next season. So you kind of play with it, but do you really trot it out within a bowl game? I'm not going to say this is apples to apples in like the same situation, but it's interesting in a different kind of way to me, Chris, because Coach McGuire also talked about this. You alluded yesterday in our conversation about Caleb Rogers, the thought of him moving to the interior next season. Coach McGuire talked about that as well, guard or maybe even center, because of some NFL feedback. But it didn't seem like we're tinkering with that right now. But the guy that may be stepping in as a left tackle could be a right tackle next year. Between Buchanan and so many of these other guys, there's a whole lot to sort out. I'm not putting it all on you to sort out right now, but I don't know. Is there a competition that's going to happen leading up to this game, or do you think it's settled, or how would you describe it?
If you remember back to last year at this time, bowl prep time, this is where they really kind of started to heavily experiment with pieces and what it would look like in bowl prep in lines of thinking of like what we would do the following season, which was this past year. And I think some of these moves, this is necessitated by, look, Ty Buchanan has been a right tackle for most of his career here. He's going to play left tackle in this game. There's no way of ultimately knowing whether he's going to fit next year at right or left. I think they're still somewhat in the process of, can he do it at this level here? Can we lean on him to be a starter on at one of these tackle spots and say we're good to go there? I don't even know if you're there yet. Or anything, but for this game, he's going to play left tackle, and Caleb Rogers will play right tackle. And I think, minus Monroe Mills, minus Landon Peterson, minus Seth Martin, Landon Peterson and Seth Martin were unlikely to play in this game. I think obviously Matt Keeler will be your swing tackle. If Buchanan and Rogers are your tackles, and I think Keeler is kind of the first sub in for either side. But the one guy you do get back that I expect to play, he hadn't played football in a while, and that's a bit of a concern. However, it is like it's like your safety blanket, your comfort level goes up when Cole Spencer is kind of back in the mix. Yeah. And available to play, and probably will play in this game, his last college game. So whether he wants to put him at center or one of the guard spots or whatever it may be, I think that is nice to have. So you've got a 7-guy rotation that you feel pretty good about, guys that have played a ton and all that. So I don't know if I view this as much of a concern as the defensive line, just for this game in particular. Now, the scary part is for like next year with this position group, when Dennis and Rusty and Cole and all those guys depart, and you're left with Buchanan, Jacoby Jackson, and and that's why, and obviously Caleb Rogers. But you need to sustain this level of play and even upgrade it if you can. So we'll get into that as the show goes along today, about maybe a piece that you've added to that mix for next year. But that's the way I would view that. So I don't know if there's, if you're necessarily, but like Jacoby Jackson and Ty Buchanan are going to be pieces for you would think somewhere next year, unless you get recruited over. unless they bring in somebody that's better than you. This is kind of the way it goes, though, at times.
Did you make a reference to my boo, or did I hear a connection cut out? Security blanket? Is that what you called the blanket?
Like, people call their blanket like their boo, like their teddy bear or whatever. Not
scared the hell out of me. I thought my wife was standing behind me for a second.
That was probably, I probably didn't hit that note exactly right.
No, you went Nelly and Kelly Rowland on us.
Okay, yeah. So anyway,
yeah, there you go. Let's talk about another guy that we're going to see back in the mix for a much different reason than any of the other next in line type guys. Now, this is a guy that was first in line. Actually, okay, let me reset the deck. You kick off the season, he was about third in line. Then he became like first in line. Then he went back to second, and then who's on third? And then there was a red shirt in there somewhere. Jacob Rodriguez, young man who got off the airplane with not a young man's mustache. Saw a picture of that yesterday as he hit the tarmac there in Shreveport. He's back in the mix. So this is one of those, totally different categories where you're getting a starter back and somebody that was really impactful for you, but we didn't see in the last game. So you could preserve another year for him. So couldn't go without mentioning him because he's one of the best players on your roster, and he'll be back out there.
He is, and I'm guessing he's going to be one that has some communication in his helmet, which is that's high praise when you're one of these guys that's got multiple years left to play after the season, and again, this one might as well be like a Jacob Rodriguez fan podcast at some level because, sorry. You can be mad if you want. I think very highly of who he is, the player, and Ben Roberts too. You are in phenomenal shape with those two kids because they love where they're at. They're phenomenal players. They're smart. They're all in. If you had this kind of experience and effort and the kind of players these kids are at every position, boy, you'd be cooking with gas, man. But yeah, Jacob comes back and like I said, you've got your full complement of linebackers. And so I think with that, does Tim DeRuyter get a little creative with Josiah Pierre and maybe Bryce Ramirez? Maybe you kind of morph those guys into, okay, let's play them at edge a little bit. Let's play them, do some different things. Since we're missing a few of these other guys and you've got time to experiment and kind of fiddle with some of that, you've had extra time to teach and learn and all those kinds of things. So, and
with Pierre, it wouldn't even be that creative, right? Because
I agree.
He's been in those shoes before. So,
and this is his last game. This is his last game. So screw it, man. Let's go.
Maybe
put
that could
on the table.
Be an advantage. We love these reform quarterbacks so much so that we're going to talk about another one coming up in just a minute when we get to the portal party that was going down yesterday. I wanted to ask you, just because you mentioned it, I think I remember Tim DeRuyter saying 3 guys get the mic in the headset, in the helmet. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but I thought he said 3 defensive players. Is it foolish to assume it's 2 linebackers and another guy, or is it they want to make it on all 3 levels? Do you have any insight as to what you would expect with Rodriguez and others?
It's okay. Now say it again. As far as
I thought, we got 3 guys that were going to be able to communicate on the defensive side of the football.
Yes.
Do you have any idea on what the others might look like? All 3 levels, all linebackers, or what?
I think what Tim will do is that I don't know if there will technically be a defensive lineman that's wearing this. I think you maybe go linebacker and then a couple of safeties because I think that the rule is the way it's stated. You can have 3 guys on defense. And I think they talked about like you can have 1 at each level, but it won't surprise me if it's. Jacob Rodriguez and Rabbit seem like no brainers to me, based on the positions they play, based on their knowledge and all those things. But then is like Baskerville the other one? Is
a freshman All-American the other one?
Exactly. So I don't know. Yeah, do you put another one on Ben in Ben's helmet? I don't know, but I think it's that kind of sweet spot right there. The only defensive lineman I can envision that would make sense is Tony Bradford. I just don't know from a defensive line standpoint. I don't know how much benefit you get from communication though.
Do you hear me? Killing.
Yeah, because it's the further back you are, the more you see and the more you need to know. And the more you can communicate. Tony Bradford and Quincy Ledet, those guys don't know what's behind them or okay, so I'm going to move and I'm going I don't know. I can see I don't see if I see the benefit there, but I think your linebackers and your safeties are really where that communication would benefit, and so it's that sweet spot right there. CJ, Rabbit, Jacob, Ben, Bryce, Josiah, guys like that, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. I don't even know if a defensive tackle needs a hand signal, much less a handset. Hey, kill the quarterback or keep the linebackers clean so they can kill the quarterback or the ball carrier on 3. Ready, break. Okay. Before we're out of here, let's get to what went down on Hump Day. And if you blinked, it was another one of those days where you might have missed a couple of things. And man, these are some spots of need. First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Heat up the action and keep the sports flames stoked this winter with America's #1 sportsbook and the official sportsbook of Locked On. There's nothing nicer than cuddling up by the warmth of a nice prop bet or a player parlay. And if you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action with their safe, secure, and easy-to-use app where it's all at your fingertips. And of course, when you win with FanDuel, you're always paid instantly. And right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 back if your team wins. You'd be a fool not to take a bite out of that apple. So get to FanDuel.com/lockedon and sign up today for your shot at $150 in bonus bets with any $5 money line bet that hits with FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. And if you blinked, it was another one of those days where you might have missed a couple of things. And man, these are some spots of need. This was after our conversation yesterday asking about some offensive line urgency, getting a little antsy out there to have a couple of new guys sign up and ready to ride along the offensive line for Texas Tech. I don't know if Vincenzo heard us in Toledo, but either way, we have that come across. We have an offensive lineman, a Toledo transfer in Vinny Scary. I'm pretty sure that's the pronunciation. And then we also have a former high school quarterback. That's what I was alluding to earlier. And a Florida wide receiver transfer in Caleb Douglas. So tell me where you want to start, Chris, because both of these are spots where you're looking to upgrade. And these guys come highly regarded, it sounds like.
Yeah, so it depends on who you ask or what conversations you're in. But, I mean, I think Vinny was a guy that he was on campus on a visit recently. I think it's pretty well documented. He was one of the top interior guys that they were after. I think that was a big deal. And, I mean, it came down to you and Auburn and Ole Miss. I mean, so this one wasn't an easy one to get, but he's got 1 year left. And he's clearly a starter on the interior. And so when you start thinking about next year, if you really do want to move Caleb Rogers inside, is this an upgrade over Jacoby Jackson? Is this, do you now have your 3 interior guys with Caleb Rogers, Jacoby Jackson, and now Vinny? So there's all. But I still think you're in line to add 2 more offensive linemen from the portal, at least. But this was a big one. He's everybody that you talk to that covered Vinny at Toledo will tell you how violent he plays. He plays it like a defensive lineman and all those things. I think, he talked about, his host on his visit was Rusty Stats and another group of 5 transfer. And so I think they immediately connected because that's kind of like, Vinny is Rusty from a year ago. And so, switching to this level and all those things. But anyway, it makes you feel a little less vulnerable about that position now that you've added a piece into that mix and a likely starter for next year. But I'm real curious to see what else they do there, because I think that you may not necessarily have all your starters on your roster just yet. So we'll kind of see how it plays out. But this one was a big one for Taj, for Barron, for Kitley, for whoever, for Caleb Rogers. I mean, for anybody associated with that offense, you need more pieces like this. And this is kind of what you were wanting to sign up for here. And again, do you wish he had a couple of years? Yes, but it's 1 year. But this is what we're talking about. Where you're trying to bridge that gap until Caden Carr and Nick Fatig and Daniel Sill and guys like that can kind of grow up, and then you can go, okay, now you're ready to go. We talked about the oven and being in the oven a little bit longer, and and all that. But this allows that gap to continue. But you need again a few more pieces to add to the mix for sure.
And by the way, it is an election year next year, so don't sleep on more pandemic eligibility coming around the corner. Just 1 year, we don't know yet what the WEF has in store for us. How about Caleb Payday Douglas, Florida wide receiver transfer? I guess he's a fan of peanut and nougat. I'm not exactly sure, but that's what his Twitter says, Caleb Payday Douglas. You're looking to upgrade the hands. There's no doubt about that. So what do we need to know about Mr. Douglas on the outside?
Well, you're in the long haul with him. He's got 3 years left to play. He's a 6'3" kid that can run. And here's the thing about Caleb. Hey, who did you get him over, right now? Well, I don't exactly know who he picked this go round over, or he picked Tech over who? I'm not real sure. Yeah. But, I mean, he was involved in this go round with Ole Miss, with Arkansas, with a variety of SEC type schools. And, he was originally committed to, I think in his high school career, there was even a time where he was committed to USC. And then he obviously signs with signs with Florida, but he was also committed to Baylor at one point too. That's where all this started. He's originally from Missouri City, Texas. I'm going to guess that Joey McGuire, James Blanchard, Brian Nance, and all those folks, Kirk Bryant, anybody that was at Baylor at the time, Josh Cochran, had some familiarity with him and his process and who he is and all those things. He was hurt most of last year, so his numbers are not great. And then the first year or 2 years ago, he was like I guess he technically would have played a little bit. So one of these years, I think he's going to get back. But anyway, bottom line is he's got 3 years left to play, but he's 6'3". I think they think he can really run. Otherwise, they don't take him. And so when you start talking about some of the schools that we've been mentioned, that you were committed to or had interest from or whatever, I think you get the kind of caliber player. Again, he's got to go do it now. But this was somebody that they knew his background, they knew who he was, they had a relationship with him. And so I think that when he got into the portal, they honed in rather quickly, and that's why there was not a lot of drama here. He kind of sneaks in here on a visit, and away you go.
Yeah, I got to admit that the first time I've heard his name is whenever I saw him committing to be a Red Raider. So it was fairly hush-hush as far as that goes. And am I wrong, or am I remembering correctly, Missouri City, home of another legendary Red Raider in DeAndre Washington, I believe?
I think you're right.
Yeah, do something like 21 did, and we'll be having a good time here in the LBK. No doubt about that. All right, the fast and furious aspect of this is not a lie, not a cliche. I mean, a very real descriptor. Chris Level told you yesterday, keep your head on a swivel. I imagine he's about to tell us the same thing. It's good advice. And join us again for the final go-around this week, as we'll have a final bowl game table setting before we head off to Shreveport. And also, we'll get to the Red Raiders and Commodores. It's Tech and Vanderbilt at a neutral site coming up this weekend on the hardwood. So a whole lot to wrap up the week with coming up tomorrow. Hope to see you then. Chris, appreciate the time as always, man.
Yes, and don't be surprised by the time you watch this if you either are about to or have already added another wideout to the mix. So, again, head on that swivel and just look at yards per catch. When you start seeing these receivers that may be joining your program, whether it's one or another one or whatever it may be, that's kind of the sweet spot there. So we'll keep an eye on it. You could be closer on some more linemen too. So anyway, it's changing quickly, but we will be here to break it down. Yes, one more day of this week, and we've got duels going on Saturday night with the hoops and the gridiron and all the stuff. And yeah, it's like drinking from a fire hose, man. But keep hope alive, everybody. Enjoyed it. Appreciate you, Calvin.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And make sure you're subscribed so you never miss a thing. We are not JKing about that. For Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.